Qinghai Hochil, the last intact wilderness of plateau in the planet. The elevation and low temperature result in the greatest and highest alpine tundra permafrost in the world. The most fully preserved plantation surface on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, as well as dense lake areas in the nominated property, provide complete habitats and passageways for large herbivores endemic to the Qinghai Tibet. Property serves as a primary birth ground for endemic and endangered species, the Tibetan antelope. These living creatures, high mountains, glaciers, plains, and lakes over thousands of kilometers of wilderness across the nominated property, constitute a beauty that is most representative of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. Hochil is the real third pole of the world. The cherished land and her creatures are undoubtedly the heritage of the mankind. Hochil is a Mongolian name which means green hills. It is located in the northwestern corner of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau and is a vast expanse of land gradually inclined downward from northwest to southeast, where the Kunluen Mountains, the Hochil Mountains, and the Ulan-Ul Mountains expand over 500 kilometers from the east to the west, lying almost parallel in between two basins. Hence the well-known expression, 3 mountains surrounding 2 basins. It covers 3,735,632 hectares of land with a 2,290,904 hectare buffer zone. The nominated property has a mean elevation of more than 4,500 meters above sea level. The highest peak of Kunluen Mountain reaches 6,680 meters, while the lowest point at the Hongshaihe River Valley is still 4,200 meters high. The annual mean temperature of the region averages from -4 to -10 degrees Celsius. The elevation and low temperature result in the greatest and highest alpine tundra permafrost in the world. Amidst the 3 mountain ranges described earlier are flat, open terrains comprised of the most fully preserved plantation surface on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, as well as dense lake areas at different stages of succession, forming a northern catchment at the source of the Yangtze River. High mountains, lake basins, climate, and adapted vegetation in the nominated property provide complete habitats and passageways for large herbivores endemic to the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. It is particularly important that the property serves as a primary birth ground for endemic and endangered species, the Tibetan antelope, and shelters nearly half of the world's wild yak populations. These living creatures, high mountains, glaciers, plains, and lakes over thousands of kilometers of wilderness across the nominated property constitute a beauty that is most representative of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. Over 1/3 of the higher plants found in the nominated property are endemic to the plateau. All of the herbivorous mammals that feed on these plants are also endemic to the plateau. As many as 60% of the mammal species in the property are plateau endemic. Fully preserved plateau surface, high lake distribution, complete grass meadow ecosystems, rarely in contact with humans or seen elsewhere in the hinterland of Asia, and magnificent mammal migrating scenes constitute the most prominent features of the nominated property. Qinghai Hochil shows unique scenery on the world's largest, highest, and youngest plateau, incorporating landforms, habitats, and biological features. It is the most complete plantation surface and basin on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. The integrity of this geographical unit has been maintained for nearly 300 million years. Dense areas of lakes were developed on the plateau surface and in the basin, showing inland lacustrine landscapes at a high altitude. The northwest to southeast inclined special pattern of the nominated property consists with the zonality of vegetation on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. Horizontally, the vast base of the nominated property clearly shows a meadow-steppe desert succession in the alpine environment. Various kinds of wetland developed around the lakes further diversified habitats within the nominated property. Rarely disturbed by humans, these habitats make up a magnificent panorama of wilderness. A considerable portion of the world's Tibetan antelope and wild yak population inhabit the nominated property. Tens of thousands of female Tibetan antelopes migrate for hundreds of miles between birthing and wintering areas every year. It is a marvelous and rare natural phenomenon that the world doesn't want to lose. The nominated property preserves a complete habitat for steppe inhabiting large mammal communities on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, a special biogeographic and ecological region offering the most typical habitat for large ungulate species such as the Tibetan antelope, the wild yak, the Tibetan wild ass, and the Tibetan gazelle, all endemic to the plateau. The most representative animal, the Tibetan antelope, is included in the Icon Red List as endangered and in CITES Appendix 1 as a key protected species. Qinghai Hochil is the largest base for Tibetan antelope birthing and inhabitation as well. Females travel long distance to its lake basin every summer year. Nearly 30,000 of them gather around the lakes of Xunhai and Taiyang alone. The birth ground in Hochil takes almost 80% of identified birth area in the entire antelope range. Even during the winter, some 40,000 Tibetan antelopes will stay for the winter, accounting for 20 to 40% of the world's population. Such special migration pattern is not yet seen among other existing large mammal species. Many scientific questions remain unanswered. The largest animal on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau is the wild yak, and the Qinghai Hochil shelters 32 to 50% of the world's wild yak population. The Qinghai Tibet Plateau, represented by the nominated property, suffers significantly from global climate change. Remote sensing data have shown that the lakes in the nominated property are notably expanding due to increased summer precipitation and glacier melting. But how these changes affect the ecosystem and key species that live in it requires further studies. The response of such a special plateau ecosystem bears significant value in the context of a changing world. Most areas of the nominated property have no human interface and therefore remain in their pristine state. Only in the east there is a small number of residents who still keep Tibetan nomadic tradition and impose little impact on the property. A highway and a railway that connect Qinghai and Tibet pass through the nominated property from the north to the south. Animal migration in this area has not yet shown any notable sign of being affected because the construction and management of these transport lines incorporated the needs of wildlife migration, which helped Tibetan antelopes and other species adapt to the changes quickly. Better still, intensive patrols along the transport lines have created a safe corridor for wildlife, where large groups of animals come in wintertime unnerved at the sight of humans. This is a large enough area to protect the integral elements of the property's outstanding natural value and to maintain the stability of local ecosystems and the continuity of natural evolution. The boundaries of the nominated property and the buffer zone that have been identified are clearly marked on maps and on site. A small number of herders live in the nominated property. Influenced by their traditional nomadic lifestyle, Tibetan Buddhist teachings and government-initiated environmental campaigns, and NGO involvement, they have shown strong initiatives to participate in conservation efforts. A few self-assisted tourists, mostly in summer, along the Qinghai-Tibet Highway generally won't affect the integrity of the property's value. Administrative regulations and conservation plans have been especially formulated for the nominated property. The two involved national nature reserves have already obtained the highest legal protection status at the national level. All areas within the nominated property are state-owned and are protected areas at the national level. A management system and a coordination mechanism have been established to further ensure human and financial resources by engaging central and local governments, communities, NGOs, and research institutions. Concerted efforts from these members of society, plus central and local legal protection, have effectively maintained the natural state of wilderness in the nominated property and have ensured the ongoing survival of species that inhabit the land. In the future, the conservation and management of the nominated property will continue to improve following the guidelines below. Strengthen the monitoring and research of the property's natural values, including landscapes and biological features, in order to protect and manage the property adaptively and effectively. Carry out monitoring and research on threats and take preventive or mitigating measures accordingly. Involve local Tibetan herders living in the property and buffer zone into conservation, management, and educational efforts. Continue to increase public participation and seek more attention effort on conservation fronts from the society. Promote the building of a suitable presentation system whereby controlling the number of tourists. Implement long-range control and management along the transport lines to maintain the property's values at the least affected level. Establish a coordinated management agency that coordinates efforts from central, provincial, municipal, and local authorities to protect the nominated property in an effective way. Qinghai Hochil is the best representative and result of the Grand Plate tectonic and evolutional process. The intact ecosystem and biodiversity of Tibetan Plateau is preserved in the area. It is also the key habitat for endemic species, for example, Tibetan antelope and snow leopard. The tectonic processes create the great geological landscape of Hochil. The landscape contains the superlative natural phenomena, for example, the great migration of Tibetan antelope, which could be seen nowhere else in the world. Hochil is the real third pole of the world. The cherished land and her creatures are undoubtedly the heritage of the mankind.